Okay, so my project is on how mental health of various Asian groups is affected by their respective societies. Just a little bit of background on why this is an important topic. So, the mental health of Asian Americans has long been a taboo topic for multiple reasons. The main one being that there are a lot of societal expectations both within the Asian community and outside of it that are not large on expressing how things make them feel or where their mental health may be. And this is typically due to a lot of cultural expectations that the Asian community places on themselves and also the outside community places on them. So, in terms of the US, Asian groups are often marginalized as the most successful minority, so their struggles are not as projected as other racial groups may be. However, there is a lot of research to show that the mental health of Asian Americans is worse than ever. So, going into the first study here, um, the first study basically asked students of different Asian backgrounds at a predominantly white institution to complete a survey on possible traumas they could have experienced as a child. And the results showed that ethnocultural trauma, betrayal trauma, significantly impacted disassociation, hallucinations, post traumatic stress symptoms, and hypervigilance. So you may be wondering, what is ethnocultural betrayal? So, ethnocultural betrayal trauma is when you are betrayed or you experience trauma from people in your own society. And this is oftentimes something that happens in a lot of Asian communities, as there are a lot of expectations placed on us culturally by our parents, and those expectations were placed on them by their parents. So it's kind of just a generational sort of situation that makes it really difficult for us to address certain mental health issues that we may have. And it's important because it shows that fears and traumas are made as children and that they carry into adulthood. So, a lot of the times we don't realize in the Asian community how much the way we grew up impacts certain issues we find ourselves commonly facing. And with that, it makes it really hard for us to truly understand ourselves and who we are. So, the reason why it's super important to be aware of that is so that we can highlight the fact that mental health is important and it should be something that we are heavily working on. That's not to say that there aren't external pressures from specifically Caucasian society and stereotypes placed upon us as the quote unquote or model minority, but a lot of the pressure is also put on ourselves by our own communities. And then, so if we look at this chart on trauma, you can see that there's a lot of societal trauma and cultural values which tie into cultural stress and us feeling as though we have to act in a certain way. But the biggest thing here is cultural betrayal trauma, and how, based on how we grew up, is an indication of what kind of treatment we accept as we grow older. So then looking at the next study was an experiment which had data from 3 waves of the COVID household impact survey, and it was used to describe social engagement and mental health symptoms during the pandemic. Obviously, the results showed that there was a steady decline in social engagements and mental health during the pandemic, although this varied from group to group. And why it's important specifically for the Asian community is that, as we saw, or as you will see in the next slide, it was highest for Asians. And this could be due to the fact that they're viewed, since we're viewed as a model minority, we also have to have something to back that up. We have to have achievements or accolades that show why we should remain the model minority. And this oftentimes leads us to overwork ourselves and not seek resources. And in turn, it makes us ashamed when we don't have anything to portray. So, going on to the next slide here, we can see that this is other races, and other races are nowhere near as high as Asian um, ethnicities and how we feel like certain pressures. And this has a lot to do with our cultural values and how we grew up, but also with the expectations society places on us. So then going into the last study here, the last study used data from uh, the National Latino and Asian American societies from before they migrated versus after and how this affected mental health. The study was predominantly based for women, and the results showed that immigrants with many reasons to migrate had less mental health problems. So, looking at why this is important, it's important because it shows that migration that leads to better mental health is only if a home state is in a dire circumstance. So it kind of shows how, for most people who migrate, they don't really wish to migrate. But in Asian communities in particular, they don't wish to migrate because they're afraid of how they will be perceived and the expectations that will be placed on them once they do. As Asian hate and crime is at an all time high. And in general, women are afraid to seek help in the mental health industry as they feel like they'll be judged for what they share. So that's kind of really shown in this quote on the next page. And this quote basically says, "What I have found is that immigrant women who end up seeking out counseling are looking for someone who speaks the language or at least has some cultural familiarity. They just want someone to understand their culture and point of view." So when we're looking at this and why this is important, it's important because as a society, there are people who do wish to seek help, but they feel that they will be judged if they do so. And so oftentimes this leads them to not seek help. So as a community, we need to make sure that we have more resources for people of different cultural backgrounds, as people aren't going to share if they don't feel welcome or if they feel like they're going to be judged. So, wrapping up on my research or what I researched and have found, I would say the biggest takeaway is that while there are a lot of societal pressures, there are also a lot of internal society pressures from our own culture, which lead us to feel a certain way. And in turn, we need to be able to address those misconceptions about mental health if we truly wish to move forward. Thank you for listening.